Brew some coffee, pull up a chair, and open your mind. Today on Science versus Conspiracy over Coffee, we'll be discussing AI. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show. I am your host, Conspiracy, and we have a special guest again this week, Michael Clogs. He is the owner of Depictions Media. It's a multimedia podcasting video company in Vancouver, and he's on the show today to talk about AI. So, welcome.
Hey, glad to be back, Bob. I love your show. Let's talk about all those things that uh, that kind of scares and freak us out, right?
Exactly.
I you were showing one of my favorite conspiracies that I believe in my heart that hey, we made it to the moon and we made it back and safely.
Yeah. Yeah, if anybody's listening who hasn't seen the show, about the moon landing, we did an episode a little while ago about it, and I talked about some interesting alternative theories, I guess, for it.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, so we're talking about AI and how it's going to ruin our lives, how the machines are taking over. What's your take on AI?
Okay, because I have done some programming. I'm just not very good at it. There's guys out there that do a way better job at programming than I do.
Hmm.
But here's my actual take on this is it isn't the computer itself that I'm worried about taking over. It's the guy who hired the guy to program the computer. He's the one that really worries me
Hmm.
because what is his agenda when he had the damn thing built?
Right, because people don't do stuff out of the goodness of their heart, at least at that level. um, these corporations. So, what is the agenda that's behind? What's their motivation?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I mean, and there's a lot of this throughout history. Um, the town crier was sent out with a agenda to inform the people of I'm coming to take your damn tax money.
Hmm.
Cough it up, buddy. Right?
Right.
Um, and with that greed idea in mind, um, are are they building AI because it's all over the place now, and we don't just don't really talk about it. We talk. I know we've talked about there's a talk about open AI and some of the things that it's in all of our households. If we have a smartphone,
Hmm.
if we log on to Google or Facebook or Twitter, it's like the algorithm is AI. Is it
Hmm.
not?
Exactly. Yeah, it's nothing new. We're hearing a lot more about it because this Chat GPT and OpenAI is kind of making these leaps and bounds in artificial intelligence. But we've had these um, algorithms and computer programs for years now. They're just getting like more sophisticated, I guess. But like you said, like Google, doing a Google search is a sense AI. Um, Even like from the initial days by typing in a Google search back in the late 90s, and showing results based on what you're searching for. That
Yeah.
was kind of like the start of being able to program in and learn what people are searching for to give you the best results. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So the other things that is like with Google Ads, right? Um, how many of your listeners that are business owners are going to remember remarketing?
Hmm.
How how do you think it was remembered that oh, Bob Homer, you looked at that Tascam podcast editor
Hmm.
and It followed you along. Everything you did, every screen that you opened up, because most of us now use some version or another of Google Chrome
Hmm.
as our main browser.
Right. Yeah, because even Microsoft, their new Edge browser is based off of the Google Chrome platform.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, exactly. And over the years, it started off with when people were just on their desktop or laptop, and doing all their searches from one computer. But then as smartphones evolved, and tablets came out, Google adapted their algorithm to multiple devices. So you can start your search on your computer, and then on your way home from work, on when you're on the bus or whatever, and you're checking your phone, you can pick up right where you left off, and the whole time it's learning your patterns.
yeah. I mean, one of the conspiracy I've heard that is that Google knew that a 16-year-old girl had been sexually active when she was pregnant before she knew that she knew, obviously she knew that she was sexually active,
Hmm.
but but before she knew she was pregnant and before she had a chance to tell her parents that she was sexually active and could possibly be pregnant. Well, in that, and that's the thing about AI. It can learn to that point,
Hmm.
depending on what the agenda of the person programming it is, or the agenda of the person who hired the programmer. It's and like I said, leading back to it's like when people build systems with just the idea of greed in mind,
Hmm.
how much crap can I load into somebody's house, and it's like it can be kind of scary that this little thing is following you around everywhere.
Exactly. So let's just go back to that. Who are the people involved? What's their agendas? Um, so the Open AI project, and it hasn't really been around that long, um, but it's made some huge progress. It was started, I guess, in 2019, with an investment from Microsoft of about $1 billion. Um, and then this year, they've already invested around $10 billion in 2023.
That's one hell of a paycheck, isn't it?
That's one hell of a paycheck. So you got Microsoft. Elon Musk was an early investor and board member. He pulled out as a board member, but he's still an investor. One of the other groups is, and I'm going to butcher the name of this, but the Koslog Adventures, um, KHOSLA. Um, anyways, I'll get the proper name, the proper pronunciation of that. Um, but it's been documented that they actually have ties to the CIA as one of their front companies. Um, and they have some pretty significant board members. Tony Blair uh, joined as a special advisor in 2010. Um,
Former
in
Prime Minister Tony Blair.
Former Prime Minister Tony Blair, 2010, he became a special advisor.
Oh,
In 2012, the Rice Hadley Gates group um, uh, joined as joined a partnership with them, and that's headed by former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, former Defense, yeah, sorry, former Defense Secretary Robert Gates, and a State Department official, Anya Manuel.
yeah, and if I remember correctly, um, they were they held those positions under George Bush Jr., shall we
Hmm.
say?
Yeah.
Interesting. In which case, Tony Blair was also prime minister during that same time, wasn't
Hmm.
he? We're painting a very interesting picture here.
Yeah. So yeah, so those are the people that are behind AI. So or like the Open AI project. Um, and then we have the other one, the other kind of competing one, the Mid Journey, which is the other kind of graphical, um, like Dolly image generation using user prompts and everything. Um, and you got to look at it says it's a self-funded project on their website, but the advisory committee are people from Apple, Google. Um, so you got to really wonder, even if it is quote unquote self-funded,
Yeah,
it's backed by some of Silicon Valley's biggest players.
yeah. You know that that self funded thing is like it means I don't want to tell you who's invested in me.
Yep, exactly.
But it is some of the really big when you talk about Apple and Microsoft, and a lot of people kind of ignore Elon Musk, but Elon
Hmm.
Musk was back in the beginnings of now I want people to hear this correctly. Okay, back in the beginnings of the World Wide Web, because the internet itself is older than we are.
Hmm.
More
Yeah, the
than
ARPANET.
it's almost 60 years old. The actual web itself, and it was created by and see when we look at that, we have to understand that that the internet itself was created by a bunch of scientists working for governments on military projects.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
the whole
if you
yeah.
ever thought that the National Security Agency was actually looking over your shoulder,
No.
hmm, maybe I don't know.
Yeah, the ARPANET was or the internet. Then the four the ARPANET was created to for nuclear fallout during a war, so that the computers and government or the military bases would still be able to function if some were taken out. So exactly, everything it has its roots in military and secrecy.
Yeah. Now, granted, in comparison to the speed, the transfer speeds and all that kind of stuff are nothing. We're nothing then in comparison to what we have now.
Hmm.
But I remember as a kid, um, helping my father clean this office building that was owned by a company called Scott Paper.
Okay.
Now, for those of you who don't know what Scott Paper is, go look at your toilet roll. They probably created it, and they had these server farms in the building that he cleaned.
Hmm.
Now, and it's like, and it was reel to reel tapes and all that kind of stuff, and um, but it was there to transfer information around to all their plants that they had all over North America between the U.S. and Canada of transfer data because
Hmm.
these things were constantly moving and they were transferring data about how to make better toilet paper,
Right.
or was it just toilet
Or was
paper?
it just toilet paper?
Because when you consider that the city that this farm was in
Hmm.
was in Philadelphia, that is like, yes, Philadelphia is a major player in transferring information because hey, that's where the U.S. federal government found this birthing place.
Hmm.
It's just that
Interesting.
nobody really wants to talk about it. They talk about Washington all the time, but nobody really talks about what really happens in the original birthplace of their
Mm.
government.
That's really
So
interesting. I didn't know that story.
yeah, there's a lot
Hmm.
of stuff back and forth about just simple transferred information,
Hmm.
and we wanted to do it better and better, right?
Right.
thus leading to artificial intelligence where it can store and intuitively, the idea is that it could
Hmm.
transfer information intuitively from person to person, thus creating the creation of Google. And hey, I know, I'll sit in my university dorm and I'll create a communication platform that connects all of us university students around the world.
Yeah.
Sound familiar?
Well, in the early days of Google, it's documented that they received funding from the CIA and other government agencies to, like you said, work at transferring information back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and then what was I going to say? Sorry. I had something else here. Um, Obviously, I'm cutting this part.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Time.
yeah. No, because I was going to say something about, um, but I thought I had it in this document, but I guess I don't. Um, it doesn't matter.
Oh,
Um,
data.
okay, so let's jump over to um, some of the stuff that you were telling me about earlier about in your video production, you use a service that translates your voice into text.
Yeah, I do actually. And I don't use remind me that I was that off. Okay. Um, I use Otter.io.
Okay.
Now, of course, the .io I believe leads us to Iceland, doesn't it?
I'm not sure where that one.
We'll double check on that, but I think it I think so. But anyway,
Hmm.
um, so I don't use with the big name chat GP. Was it GP or GT?
GPT.
GPT. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was missing something there. I don't use the more common one, but I've been using Otter.io for about 5 years now,
Okay.
and 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 see here's where the rub comes in, because the reason why I use it is because I'm dyslexic.
Right.
Okay, so these tools can be really handy if you have an impairment somewhere.
Hmm.
And I know other people who have autism and things like that. Or Asperger, shall we say? Because too many people want to go to Rain Man and
Hmm.
I can count the toothpicks. No, that's not just that's a rare thing. It's not. I'm not going to say it's not real, but it's such a rare thing. But
Hmm.
there's impairments where okay, I need to store that thought so I can go back to it later on. So I open up, and it's as simple as again, leading back to AI, I can simply just go, "Hey Siri, open Otter,"
Hmm.
and
There it is.
thus there's my Otter screen, right? So um, and it becomes a really handy tool for me to write lots of articles,
Hmm.
or store thoughts for future articles, restore thoughts for me to appear on on your podcast here, Bob. It's like, and it also helps us do a lot of things. I know a lot of people that use programs like that to do these things, and I guess that's how GPT came
Hmm.
about. Is they decided to expand on what was a simple transcription program And in order for that transcription program to work, it has to use some sort of intelligence.
Hmm.
You know? And it also lands in our editing programs also, where I can play one version of a video where the camera guy forgot to move away from traffic in order to shoot the footage, and then miracle of miracles,
Hmm.
if I'm using final the latest greatest version of a Final Cut, which that one I do actually update all the time. It takes the car noise away because I told the computer to focus on any sound that falls within the human voice parameters.
Hmm.
And bam, car falls to the background, voice comes up front, and audiences are happy because they get to hear what we're saying,
Right.
even if we are standing in heavy traffic.
Hmm. That's amazing that it
Yeah.
has that ability. Yeah.
So it's we can't say term artificial intelligence as evil.
Hmm.
It's leading back to who is behind it and what their agenda is. You know?
Exactly. Like, and this is kind of a good segue into this next thing, um, with the science part of it and helping people with disabilities, because I just read this article from this team of researchers in Japan, and I'll put a link in the show notes about it. Um, that they're actually using AI and fMRI scanners to look at the brain, and while they're while they're in the scanner in the machine, they're showing them different images, and through AI they're able to recreate those images that the person has was looking at with really good accuracy. Like they showed what the original image was, and then what the what the AI drew of based on all the scans, and they're pretty close.
Yeah,
They're not exact, and they're um, it's early days. This is just something that's brand new,
yeah,
so there's going to be some. It's not going to be perfect yet, but the point is that um, on the surface, that's really cool for people who and they're trying to build it as people with disabilities that can't communicate otherwise, that they'll be able to communicate using this a form of this technology down the road. And that's all great, but like you said, it always comes back to who's funding these programs, and what are they going to do with that information, and how can they manipulate us using that information down the road.
yeah. Well,
Mm.
in another interview, and um, that I did just a couple of days ago,
Mhm.
and I was talking to somebody. He's a fairly intelligent person. We were talking about dreams,
Mhm.
and we got into the topic of some of our mentors. Some mentors you can actually meet and greet and shake hands with. Some mentors you hire to help you get through some things, and
Mhm.
others are just people that characters that you've read about through time.
Mhm.
And two of my mentors in that direction are uh, Niels Bohr and Albert Einstein.
Right.
So when we think about the beginning of quantum physics and particle physics and everything, right, is
Mhm.
like the ultimate. People stop at nuclear physics,
Mhm.
but the ultimate for them wasn't nuclear physics when um, I can't say it in German, but the translation is spooky action at a distance.
Okay.
It's information transfer from one point,
Mhm.
say here on planet Earth,
Mhm.
and let's go say 600 light years away to whatever the M class planet is with whatever the version of human, quote unquote, human life that exists there.
Right.
And lo and behold, that information can travel beyond the speed of light.
That's crazy.
That's and that is one of the ultimate things of quantum physics is how do we actually we can't control it now,
Hmm.
but how could we eventually control it? You know,
Yeah, and that's one of the things that kind of bothers me a lot about some of the scientific community that says, "Oh, we'll never get there. Don't worry about it. It's just a theory. It's just all theoretical. It's just on paper. We'll never be able um, to do to travel those speeds or to transfer information or whatever the case may be. Given enough time and enough money and enough motivation, um, anything's possible."
okay, so let's look at Star Trek
Hmm.
and let's their impulse drives traveled at the speed of light, which sorry guys, speed of light really isn't that fast. When you consider that at the speed of light it takes you when I mentioned 600 light years to get to the next M class planet. I'm going to again put that up in quotation
Yeah.
marks because there's people in NASA there that will say, "Sorry guys, I know I'm misquoting you," but that next M class planet is beyond the lifespan of a human being.
Hmm.
So how fast is it? It's just that we experience light. Um, like the sunlight is 8 minutes away.
Right.
Um, that's not right. I said that
Well,
wrong. It's 8 seconds away. I think it's 8 seconds away, not 8 minutes.
I
Sorry.
thought it was 8 minutes,
It but
but the point is, yeah, there's a distance. Yeah.
you're starting to catch on to the point
Yeah.
when they were talking about the Mars rovers. The Mars rovers had to actually be programmed, leading back to AI again. They
Hmm.
had to be programmed to actually think for themselves because it was going to take approximately 20 minutes from my computer go look at the rock off to the left. Send. 20 minutes later, the Mars rover receives a message from me saying, "Oh, well, shit, dude, I'm already
I'm past them, 20 minutes away.
yeah, I'm away from that rock now. What do you mean? You want me to go back again and look at it, right?" So that there's the speed of light for you because as far as we know, information travels at the speed of light. Well, the spooky action at a distance actually shows that information travels at the speed of information,
Hmm.
and we don't know what it is.
Yeah, that's
So
pretty incredible.
there's a conspiracy for you. It's like how do we discover and has somebody in these Google Farms, Facebook, Twitter, Chat GPT, all the have they actually discovered how to move information at the actual speed of information, not at the speed of light?
Hmm. Yeah, it amazes me. Like even back in the mid to late '90s, when I was first getting online, and I had a dial-up modem at 14.4 kilobits per second or whatever. Um, and seemingly, like you watch the image come in like this, but still, you're doing a search. You're going to a place, and seemingly instantly, you're getting results back. Um, all this information is traveling from like across the planet. Um, to your computer, and it's loading up, and even right now, like we're talking video
It,
through the phone lines, through the cable fiber optic lines and everything, and it's instantaneous.
it, so think about this, folks. Okay, so Bob and I can talk. We what are we about? Maybe 20 miles away from each other.
Yeah, roughly, I would say.
See, and we're talking fairly seamlessly, and yet it's like Um, Houston, we have a problem here. Yeah, we see that pilot Major Tom down here in the Houston Control Center. Why is that delay? And that delay is because that signal is only traveling at the speed of light. It's like so we haven't figured, for the most part, we really seemingly haven't figured out how to move information past the speed of light. And that
Mhm.
is ultimate of quantum physics, is how do we do that? That was what they were really trying to work on, and to figure out that how do we control that spooky action at a distance, because it's spooky action at a distance because we don't know how to control it. The second we learn how to control it, it gets a real
Mhm.
name.
Yeah, and with all this AI aggregation of and analyzing of data, the amounts of data that they have access to and that they're processing, it's it's not improbable that they'll be able to figure this out pretty quickly. Because people are asking like crazy things with ChatGPT, and it's all being fed into the main system and learning. So
It's
unlike,
being fed into a central system, isn't it?
pardon?
It's all being fed into a central system. It's not like it's just local to your computer. It's being fed into a central system that everybody globally is using.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's not like in what 2016 here when Microsoft did that their AI experiment on Twitter, the Tay experiment, when they set this chatbot out on Twitter, and in less than a day it became racist and had to be shut down because people were on there teaching it how to how to um, how to be racist, how to be a bad person, how to um, just the complete opposite of what the intention was for it. Um,
Yeah.
and so I think the powers that be have learned from that mistake,
Yeah.
and they've put some safeguards in place with Chat GPT, and just so you know, the Chat GPT is the GPT part is generative pre-trained transformer. That's what it stands for.
Really?
Yeah,
No, I didn't know that. Now I feel more educated. I did have this glancing thought. Do you remember Watson?
the supercomputer that played chess and went on Jeopardy.
No, no, yeah, I guess so. Called Watson, but I wasn't thinking of that one. I was thinking about the IBM automated um, concierge,
Oh,
where Watson could be taught to do in. I think Hilton actually was working with IBM on this particular project,
hmm,
and Watson would learn everything there was to know about the city that this hotel was in.
right.
So if you were to and he was this cute looking little robot thing or whatever, right? And if you went up to him and he said, "Hi, Watson, I want to find where to go buy the Hope Diamond in this city."
Hmm.
I'm being ridiculous, of course, but Watson would come back to you. It's like, "Oh, well, if you go to Rich Street and High and Mighty Drive,
Hmm.
diamond shop that might suit your needs."
Right.
So it's like, and it was a cute little thing, and concierges around the world, they got in an uproar about it.
Hmm.
I'm leading into something with Chat GPT,
Yeah.
because the uproar now with that is that even the copywriters here at Depictions Media, they're like, "Are you going to replace us with that?" And the answer is no. I wouldn't replace them with that.
Hmm.
You know, um, and that ChatGPT, is it ever going to get to that level of creativity? It's like it's the data problem, like
Mm-hmm.
data Star Trek Next Generation data, the Brent Spiner character.
Right.
Did
Okay.
he ever? Did he ever actually learn as an android? Did he actually ever learn what human humor was? Did he actually ever learn that? It's like, and that's the big question.
Mm-hmm.
Can an artificial intelligence learn that level of humor, creativity? It's only as good as whatever the programmer was.
Exactly. Yep.
So,
Um, okay, so yeah, jumping back, yeah, like that singularity moment. They everybody talks about that moment when artificial intelligence becomes actual sentient, and but what I guess it goes back to like free will and the programming of these machines. How much are we actually teaching it, and
how much can we teach it? Um, and this is becoming like a really hot topic on it. That, but we as human beings were flawed, right?
Mhm,
Like, okay, this whole thing started with a religious belief, right? That there is this ultimate creator, uh, perfect being out there,
mhm,
right?
right,
And we're a step down from that, but we're not perfect. We're less than perfect.
mhm,
So everything that we create is going to be less than us, and everything that's created would be less that thing could create would be less than it would be another step lower than us, right?
mhm,
It's everything's going to be built with a flaw in it, but and that flaw, sometimes it's going to be just simple human nature. And again, going back to agendas, what if the person creating it just has this less than honorable, shall we say, or less than loving agenda?
mhm,
You talked about this thing that they had to shut down because within a day it learned hatred. It's like, so the people it had to it and that's the key word. It learned hatred. It wasn't created with hatred in it.
mhm.
That was the thing. Was there a line of hatred from the programmer into somehow he put it in there, so it just expanded on it. And that's we build things with our own flaws in them.
Mhm. Yeah, the information or the computer program is only as good or as bad as the ones programming it, and that's a good point. There was flaws obviously in the programming of that Microsoft's AI bot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but now with like ChatGPT, everything's being filtered into it, and it's learning, and it's taking these checks and balances of what it's originally programmed for, and what are um, people actually putting into the system, and how is it actually learning, and um, kind of what's the next step. Um, because right now the GPT is at version 4. Most of the software is still running on, I guess, version 3 to 3.5 or something. But what makes version 4 kind of the next leap, that it incorporates um, images, and it's able to look at an image and um, understand what the image is, and then recreate an image based off of kind of what it's been taught and what it knows about imagery. So that's kind of like the
Yeah,
where it's going. Because right now you're just typing in prompts into the system, but now you can feed it images and say, tell me about a Monet, and like it's not quite there yet, I don't think, um, but soon you're going to get those. It's going to tell you what it's I guess, feelings about art and culture and everything.
Yeah, yeah, and uh, Brent Spiner's gonna love that one. but but on a more serious note, okay, you're a photographer the same as I am, right?
Yep.
Because I think the first time we ever actually met was in some sort of photography networking thing.
Hmm.
Um, and I think about some of the greatest photographs I've ever seen in my life. And one is the Afghan girl,
Hmm.
National Geographic. One actually landed on um, the Globe and Mail, and I don't know where the photographer was, what he used to actually get this image, but a firebomb hit a man's feet in Ukraine.
Okay.
Okay, and we're getting into maybe something a little too political, but we're gonna. I just want to focus on that image
Hmm.
because the photograph was snapped. You use Nikon or Canon?
I use Nikon.
You use Nikon. Okay, so Canon, the shutter and aperture speeds are slightly different. So you're going to capture the image slightly different because of that too. Okay.
Hmm.
So, but you probably would have still captured the same image because you were pointed and just shooting multiple in whatever the automatic mode is. Like in Canon, it's 12 frames per second. I can capture things, right?
Right.
So he captured this person. They had thrown something, and what came back at them in return was a firebomb, and it hit their feet. It
Wow.
shattered right at their feet. So whatever was inside that firebomb, it splashed, it flamed up, and
Hmm.
he was and you could watch as the flame was midway his body as he's becoming a human torch. That's what made
Wow.
this photograph so. It's like that this guy captured that. So how do you teach that feeling of like, oh my God, one,
Hmm.
what was going through the man's mind as he was becoming this human torch because he's now been splattered with whatever the incendiary material was that was inside of that firebomb.
Hmm.
And as a photographer, whatever you capture through that because you're focused, right?
Oh yeah. Yep.
So whatever you capture with your camera gets buried into the back of your brain.
Hmm.
How do you those emotions, how do you teach a artificial intelligence that when it looks at that image to think about what was going through one, the person who was just lit on fire,
Hmm.
and two, the person capturing that image? How do you teach that and teach it with a compassion
Hmm.
to
Yeah, that's really interesting because there's a lot to consider in images like that, like newsworthy images, because there's like you got to also apply like the context of the situation, because depending on um, what the situation is, people are going to have um, what was the motivation of the person throwing this this fireball,
I only
and
focus on two,
yeah,
right?
so
What
like,
was he
do
thinking?
they feel justified doing this? Like, what were they protecting? Like, these are like all
Right.
things that are because obviously the person doing the act, throwing the fireball, feels justified, that it's important enough to them, and they're the good guys, and the other side is the enemy. And from the other perspective, it's reversed. And teaching a computer, how do you, yeah, do that, to be objective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So going back to the Afghan girl, right?
Hmm.
Uh, And geez, think about the app that particular photograph with, but she is this about 56, 57 years old now,
Hmm.
right? No longer a little girl, but her her house was destroyed. When you look closely at the image, you see that the hijab that she was wearing, I'm calling it a hijab
Hmm.
for lack of better, uh, uh, that she was wearing was scorched because she narrowly escaped being burned up because
Hmm.
somebody had destroyed her home, lit it on fire, or whatever. I don't remember the details around it because that image was politically motivated.
Hmm.
It wasn't just National Geographic wasn't in the area because oh we heard that there was this little girl with these pretty eyes.
Right.
He was in the area because he was a photojournalist trying to capture. I don't remember if it was uh, the Afghans fighting back against the Russians or whatever it was, but that's why he was in the area is because he was a photojournalist trying to capture the human indignities of war.
Hmm. Which
That
has,
was what
yeah,
the story was,
yeah, yeah,
you know.
with that political agenda behind it. Who are the people
Yeah,
again? Who are the people
yeah. So
funding it?
how do you teach we're poking fun at GPT, but how do you teach GPT to understand that?
Hmm.
Like that complexity. How do you program that into something and how do you actually get it to teach it so that it's we also have to remember that as especially if you're a photojournalist and we've the two of us were we weren't photojournalists, we were event photographers and things like that.
Hmm.
Um, I have done some protests, but not that type of protest. If there
Hmm.
was thoughts of violence, I would not go because
Right.
I've been putting myself in the fray. Um, in which my hats off to these guys who do that. It's like, hey, you're a lot braver than I am,
Hmm.
or you have a different purpose than I am. I guess is more to the point. But yeah, having shot some protests, it's like where people are marching through the streets of North America, like we want equality, we want
Hmm.
equal pay, or one of the more um, they were protesting here over India's treatment of Kashmir, which is half a world away from where we were, you
Hmm.
know, but we weren't going to get firebombed, we weren't going to get shot at.
Right.
It's like, so how do you teach people to how do you teach the chat GPT to remain neutral and open and be open to a story? It seems that it's going whoever's feeding the image in
Hmm.
could have a political agenda, and then the intelligence learns the agenda. How do we filter
Exactly. Right, and that's what I think is the one of the big concerns with what's happening with Facebook and some of the social media platforms. Excuse me, that it because it's you're on there. And I was watching I don't know if you've seen the show or heard about it. Rabbit Hole.
no,
It's
I
the
haven't
new
seen rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's the new Kiefer Sutherland series. There's only three episodes out right at the moment, but
No,
it deals with yeah
come on
it
TV.
it's on Paramount Plus.
Okay.
Um, so Jen and I watched that last night, and I don't. This is a fictional TV show, but I can see this fact being pretty accurate because it talks about social media and how AI, big data is able to process and pinpoint. kind of like what you were talking earlier about the pregnant girl, teenage girl, being able to map out who, getting to know the users, and it was saying that after only 10 likes on Facebook, they're able to know you better than um, uh, know you better than your closest friends after like 100 likes. Kind of paraphrasing, but it's like this. But after like 100 likes, they know you better than your parents, and after like 300 likes, they know you better than your spouse. So being able, I again, this was a fictional TV show, but I think it's probably fairly accurate to the type of information and the type of processing power that they're able to do right now.
Yeah, see, we're going back to the algorithm thing,
Hmm. So
and
they know what you're thinking when you want it. So when you're on social media, they can be pushing news stories um, that put you in this like echo chamber of um, whatever side of the fence you're on. You're eventually only going, and pretty quickly, just get stories from that one perspective.
yeah,
So I think that's important to when you're on these platforms. You have to be aware that you got to fact check, um, and you got to look outside the bubble every once in a while, so
yeah.
you get
Well,
different perspectives.
that was the thing. Um, Someone suggested the social dilemma as a documentary, and I
Hmm.
was watching that. It's like, now here's kind of the interesting thing about human human behavior and and in some of the data that they're actually collecting. It's like I'm sitting here watching. I'm watching. I decided to watch it. I pushed it up onto my TV via Apple TV, right from my phone to Apple TV,
Hmm.
because I think it was on Netflix or something like that.
Hmm.
So I just pushed it up there onto my 50-inch screen in the living room, right? Because I
Hmm.
didn't want to watch it while sitting in on my 32-inch screen.
Right.
Actually, what it actually boiled down to is there's limited beverage and comfort in here, and there's more comfort in the living room, and I can actually have like a bowl of chips and popcorn
Right.
and my what
Makes sense.
my
Yeah.
favorite beverage. It's like it's like a 90-minute film,
Hmm.
right? Um, that's a term that doesn't really hold valid anymore. Film.
Film.
Uh,
Yeah.
but they were talking about how they actually control by the number of clicks on Facebook or whatever.
Hmm.
I think they were more focused on Facebook than they were Twitter. They brought up other modes of social media, but
Hmm.
I think more focused on Facebook or Meta than anyone else. But how after so many likes that they actually now can control what you're going to buy,
Yep.
and the and at the towards the end of the whole documentary, because there was a dramatic line going through it also. They're talking to these people who help create Facebook, Twitter, Google, all that sort of stuff, the programmers and the people and the project leads and all that kind of stuff
Hmm.
is who they were interviewing. But there's this dramatic line. If you're not paying attention to the whole thing, you miss a dramatic line where they take this teenager, normal teenager, playing basketball, whatever, varsity team, whatever, right?
Hmm.
Stops. playing basketball, disconnects with his girlfriend, disconnects with the rest of his friends, becomes disconnected from his family, and he's focused only on whatever it was he was being fed through social media, and there was a political agenda to it.
Hmm.
That political agenda landed him in the middle of a protest that he didn't even understand, and his I think it was his mother trying to get him out of it, and they both get arrested for whatever vandalism or whatever the illegalities of that protest were.
Hmm.
But they were there because this agenda keeper had led them there. It's like, so how true is that? And when we go to fact check something,
Hmm.
how do we fact check it in a way that we disconnect from that line of information that these people who control the AI are
Hmm.
feeding us?
Yeah, because on the different platforms, you're gonna have, well, within the platforms, there's um, subtopics and sub areas where they're feeding you different things depending on what you've clicked on. So fact checking, you're absolutely right. Fact checking has become a huge problem because how do you know if you jump from Twitter over to like Apple News or Google News that that information isn't politically motivated, or it's still based on what your past history likes and dislikes and what you want to see. So you're only going to be able to find stuff that that that's in that echo chamber. And even with doing a Google search, we talked about this the other day, that you and I could be sitting at the same, right next to each other, and do a Google search for something, and we're going to get vastly different results solely based on our history of search
Right,
and
because
our
our history.
patterns and everything. Even though
Yeah,
we're searching for the exact same thing from 2 feet away, we're going to get different results, and it's unbelievable.
there's some interesting things to that. Okay, um, a family member is coming to visit, right?
Hmm.
And she's an older person, and she Google searched a train ride from where she is to where we are,
Hmm.
and she was focused on price because limited budget, because on Canada pension and all that kind of stuff, right?
Hmm.
With that total focus of price, that she wound up buying, instead of it, because she wanted to scrub a a train trip
Hmm.
off of her bucket list, right?
Okay.
Okay, so long and short of it is so because she's focused on price and she wanted to get this without breaking the budget. She wanted to get this train ride in. She wound up, because she was totally focused on price, she wound up on a bus, not a train.
Oh wow.
She had no clue that she had clicked on something that took her away from the train website
Hmm.
and took her to the bus website. She bought the tickets, and we, being the third party search, and this is where I'm going with this.
Hmm.
We, being the third party search, fact checked her train ticket
Right.
and came up with the information of, it's not a train ticket.
It's a bus. Wow.
How are you coming? And that's what caused the trigger. So how do we do that? I mean, I'm using a stupid example, right?
Hmm.
Like, how do we do that for big things, big political agenda things, where, um, well, why should we be supporting Ukraine over Russia?
Hmm.
how do we double check what it is ha- happens in the Ukraine is that makes President Zelensky over the Russian Federation leader Vladimir Putin. He's the bad guy and Zelensky's the good guy. How do
Hmm.
we figure that out? It's like
Yes, if you go to Russia, it's flipped.
yeah, it's like and it boils down to this conversation. It's
Hmm.
like, hey Bob, and this is exactly how we did the train ticket. There's a formula here. Is like, hey Bob, I found this about the about Zelensky. What do you think about that versus Putin?
Hmm.
Start talking about it, and then you go and look for something on your own because yours is going to be slightly different. And we start to compare notes back and forth again, and see the thing is what these powers to be, they created all these algorithms and stuff like that. That's what they don't want us to do.
Hmm.
They don't want us talking. They want us, should we say, surfing or however you want to put it. That's what they want us to do. They want us to communicate back through their their system, their AI system, so that how do I even know I'm talking to Bob Homer
Hmm.
at some point, and I'm not talking to a artificially created version of Bob Homer.
Yeah, exactly. And there's Microsoft's also working on um, there are things called Val-E, and it's a natural language speech synthesizer that you just need 3 seconds of someone's voice, and it's able to replicate it. So that goes back to how do you know that we're actually talking to who we're talking to, um, and visually too, because with the fakes and the AI that behind that, um, it it's going to get very tricky if we don't do something um, in the near future about how we're using this information, and we have to give some sort of pushback, I think, to these companies that are just using our information as the commodity, and
Mm-hmm.
you talk about political agendas. They're going to be able, well, they already can make you be someplace that you're not, and just even just by cutting video in a specific way. But now they're going to be able to put you in the middle of something that is potentially has making you look bad.
Yeah, to discredit you, what have you, or censor you.
Hmm. Yeah.
And we could get into like China with with some of their what is their system called? The
The,
China social media system. They
hmm.
have checks and balances that they use to that they can literally virtually imprison somebody
Yeah.
because you said something they didn't like. So now they start closing you off and making sure that your image can't be found or is seen in compromising places to
Hmm.
discredit you. It's
Yeah.
like,
It's scary.
yeah, so it can be done,
Hmm.
but that's the whole point. It's not a matter of can we do it. It's a matter of should we do it.
Hmm. Exactly. And that reminds me of actually an episode, and we'll kind of end it after this, maybe, because we're kind of running out of time. Um,
Yeah.
but it just reminded me of this episode of Star Trek Next Generation, is when Will Riker goes down to the planet to make first contact and observe the civilization, and they put on the makeup to look like they're part of the civilization, and they're studying them before they make contact. But a few of the head scientists found out about what the Enterprise, what the crew of the Enterprise was doing, and they put a stop to the first contact because they felt that their society wasn't ready to handle um, aliens and the Federation and everything that it had to offer. Um, so that kind of comes back to what you're saying. Should we? Yes, we can do it, but should we be doing it? And that kind of that's that whole thing, that whole premise of that episode. Um,
Yeah.
should we be doing it? Do we need to put on the brakes a little bit till we can figure out and understand what we're actually doing um,
Yeah.
a little bit better?
It's not a matter if the conspiracy exists or not.
Hmm.
Um, we know the science is there. It's a matter of how far down should we put the brakes on before we continue down the rabbit hole.
Hmm. And then there's no stopping it.
Yeah.
And that was the whole point of the social dilemma too. Is they're not anti technology or anti AI or anything like that. It's we need to understand what we're doing and what's the impact going to be on our society going forward. And until we do that, then we need to be cautious.
Well, I thought the end of Social Dilemma was kind of interesting, and maybe some of the listeners out there will catch on to this one. That each one of them said that had children
Hmm.
said they limited the 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 use of the smartphones, the computers, the screen times, and all that kind of stuff. These are the people who created it, and they're
Hmm.
limiting their children from being on it.
Yeah, and even Steve Jobs, when he was still alive and had his kids growing up, he wouldn't let them use a smartphone or a computer or anything like that. Like I guess his second family, um, because he's the one that was building the systems and he could see
Yeah,
the dangers of what they're being exposed to. So yeah, we have to be cautious. I guess that's the big
yeah,
takeaway. Understand what you're giving your information to, and be cautious of what you're actually giving the system.
yeah. Uh, Maybe we should come back for a second or a third try at this because it's going to keep evolving, and
Hmm.
maybe uh, we can talk more about it to keep the conversation going. That
Hmm. That'd
we can
be.
get people to really start thinking about how they're actually what they're putting out there and how they're putting it out there.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
because we need to. You need to be aware. People need to understand what they're giving their information to and what they're actually getting back from it because nothing's free. Um, we can use these social platforms for free, but there's a cost,
hmm
and we'd have to be
yeah,
prepared for that cost.
yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, let's leave it there for today. Well, thanks for joining. This has been a great conversation about AI and Chat GPT and the social dilemma and
Yeah.
all that stuff. So thanks for coming on, and we'll definitely have you back for a part two on this because, like you said, it's going to keep evolving.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for
All
having
right,
me, Bob.
yeah, thank you.
All right.
This episode of Science vs. Conspiracy Over Coffee was produced by Story Monkey Productions.